Hi, I'm Dr. P, and in this experiment, we're going to be doing the scientific method. We're going to use the scientific method to test our hypothesis that ions always combine to form a neutral ionic compound. In this experiment, we're going to take a carbonate substance, which has a 2- charge, and some kind of supporting cation, and we're going to react it with hydrochloric acid, which will convert the carbonate into carbon dioxide and water. We'll drive off the carbon dioxide and water vapors, and we'll be left behind with the salt, the chloride salt of whatever cation we had to begin with. We'll weigh the carbonate beforehand, we'll weigh the chloride product afterwards, and we'll see whether or not we have the correct number of ions to support charge neutrality. In the first step of the experiment, set up your Bunsen burner, a ring stand with an iron ring and a clay triangle, a piece of wire gauze, and your sparker in the fume hood. Next we're going to turn on the gas for the Bunsen burner. Notice in the fume hood that there are 2 blue jets, and the hose that goes to our Bunsen burner here is in the top blue jet. Underneath the fume hood, there are nozzles, and there's 2 blue nozzles for gas. Since we are attached to the top gas jet, we want to open the top gas nozzle. Then take your striker and strike it above the Bunsen burner to turn the flame. You want to adjust your flame. You can adjust your flame using the knob on the bottom to control the amount of gas, and the knob on the side here to control the amount of air. You want to adjust your flame so that it looks like mine here, with that nice inner blue cone. Next, you're going to position your Bunsen burner and the height of your clay triangle so that the top of that inner blue cone is going to be touching the bottom of your crucible. Then put your crucible on your clay triangle like this and heat it for 5 to 10 minutes in the hot part of the flame. After 5 to 10 minutes of heating your crucible, you can use your tongs, your stainless steel tongs, to take it off and set it down on a piece of wire gauze. You never want to set it directly onto the bench top because it could crack as the hot crucible touches the cold bench top. Also, it's going to leave a great mark on the bench top that is not going to be able to be easily removed. Allow your crucible to cool down for about 3 to 5 minutes. Then weigh it on the analytical balance. To use the analytical balance, first make sure that it's turned on using the power button. Next, you're going to want to push the 0/T button to tare the balance. This makes it read 0. Then you'll open the door and you'll place your crucible on the balance. You want to handle your crucible using the tongs because you don't want to put your fingerprint oils on the crucible. The whole purpose of us heating the crucible in the first part was to get rid of those oils and any water that was absorbed to the surface of the crucible. Make sure you close the door before recording in your notebook the weight of the empty crucible. Using your scapula, add about 0.5 grams of one of the carbonates to the crucible without pressing the tare button again. You want to get the total mass of the crucible and the carbonate compound. Never place unused solid back into the original container because you may have contaminated it. Just throw it out. Make sure before you weigh your carbonate compound, you have closed the glass slide doors on the analytical balance. In my case, the mass before of the empty crucible was around 11.5, and so I added enough carbonate to make it around 12.0. Now record the exact mass of your crucible and the carbonate. Using gloves and working under the fume hood, obtain about 50 milliliters of HCl from the stock bottle into a small beaker. Again, never pour anything back into the stock bottle. This is more HCl than you need. Dump it down the sink drain in the fume hood with less running water. Then, using your small graduated cylinder, measure out 10 milliliters of HCl. Using your dropper, add HCl to the carbonate salt. Notice that it will fizz as it generates carbon dioxide gas. Carefully keep adding the HCl. Be careful not to have it splash out until all 10 milliliters have been added. If you have a small crucible like I do, adding only 5 milliliters of HCl is acceptable. Place your crucible containing the carbonate and the HCl on the clay triangle and put the lid on with it slightly ajar. This next step is probably the most important step. Raise your clay triangle with the crucible and the lid a little higher than you had it earlier. Light your Bunsen burner and then gently warm the crucible. You want to only gently warm it at first because you don't want the HCl inside the crucible to boil out and splash around. It could take some of the chloride salt that you're generating and it could spatter it outside the crucible. This is why we have the lid on the crucible in this step. So heat gently and with your crucible raised up higher on the ring stand than previously so that the HCl does not splash out. This is what my crucible looks like after about 5 minutes of heating. Notice that most of the HCl is gone and there's just a little bit of wet solid at the bottom. Now we're going to want to cook that wet solid until it's completely dry. Turn off the Bunsen burner and then, using the tongs, carefully remove your crucible containing the chloride salt and place it on the wire gauze. Notice that the crucible lid also has a little bit of solid on it. You're going to want to use your scapula to try to scrape that solid into the crucible after it's cooled down before you weigh it. After cooling for 3 to 5 minutes, go back to the same analytical balance you used before with the doors shut. Press the tare button. And then, using the tongs again so that you don't get your fingerprint oils on the crucible, place the crucible, and just the crucible, not the lid, the crucible containing the chloride salt onto the analytical balance. Close the door and record the mass. So at this point you should have 3 masses recorded in your notebook. You'll have the mass of the empty crucible, the mass of the crucible containing the carbonate salt, and then the final mass, which is the mass of the crucible containing the chloride salt, since we had converted the carbonate into chloride and drove off the carbon dioxide and water vapor when we heated it on the Bunsen burner. Next, you're going to repeat this experiment using all the carbonate salts that are listed in the lab manual. Then you'll clean up by washing your crucibles out under the sink and dumping any extra HCl down the sink traps in the back of the fume hood. Wash up your area and spray it down with disinfectant, and then clean up for the day and do your calculations.